Attention on deck, that's some Navy stuff. At ease. Good morning, my name is Jim Ader, and I work at the Albany County Veterans Services Bureau, and I thank you all very much for coming and joining us today as we honor, depending on who you ask, Mr. John J. Swedick or Swedick, and that's, even the brothers split it, so I'm not sure how I'm going to fall on that, so I'll probably say it, I won't say it again, and that way I don't have to worry about it. So before we start our program, I'd like to thank Commander Miller, the new commander here at the Joseph E. Zaloga American Legion Post, for his hospitality. Thank you for the use of the facility. It's always a pleasure to be here. Again, thank you for coming this morning and taking your time out of your busy day to be with us. We are honored today to honor an Albany County veteran for the month of July, Mr. Swedick, depending again, who served in the United States Army during the Battle of the Bulge in World War II. We'll start our program this morning with the Pledge of Allegiance, and if you would, Colonel Schiller, please lead us on your feet.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And if you would, please remain standing. Charlene, offer the invocation.
May we have a moment of silence as we celebrate the life of our honoree, Private John Swedick. In this moment of silence, our hearts are filled with God's love, just as that love helped the Swedick family maintain their courage and hope as their husband, father, and brother served America during World War II on the brutal battlefields of the Bulge along the border of Belgium and Germany. John and the men he served with became the wall that broke the enemy's last main assault in Europe. We could never thank these extraordinary men of the greatest generation enough for their courageous service and sacrifice to our country and its people, for digging in and standing their ground during unspeakable horrors from an unconscionable enemy. Today, we lift up our voices to express gratefulness and to honor one of these men dedicated to the noble ideas of our country. Show us ways in our communities, churches, and synagogues to thank and love them better. Keep and protect these heroes in your care, as well as their families. We ask the God of our hearts to give us a true appreciation of the benefits of human freedom, and never let us forget the lives that were sacrificed to attain it. Amen.
Amen. You guys have take your seats. Thanks, Charlene. We're very pleased to have with us today Albany County Executive Daniel P. McCoy, a combat veteran, Congressman Paul Tonko, Colony Town Supervisor Paul Mahan, and a couple members of the Colony Town Board. Thank you very much for coming with us and joining us today. All right, Joe, you ready? A committee was formed to select a Veteran of the Month, and I keep trying to get on the committee, but I keep being rebuffed, so I'm not going to give up, though, just so they know. The committee is made up of distinguished veterans, and their task is not an easy one. To introduce his committee and veteran guests, Mr. Joe Policino.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. The Honor Veterans Committee, the members will stand and be recognized. John Nardolillo, Henry Rosenzweig, and two are missing, Jerry Perry and Tom DeMeo. Also with us today are members of the VFW, the American Legion, World War II, Korean veterans, Vietnam veterans, Catholic War veterans, Purple Heart recipients, disabled American veterans, Marine Corps Leaguers, Jewish War veterans, and representatives from the VA hospital. Are all here today along with members of the community to honor deceased veteran of the month of July 2015, John J. Swedick, United States Army, World War II. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. And now I'd like to ask Matthew Swedick to come up and talk about his grandfather.
How did it ever get changed?
Thank you. I wanted to thank County Executive McCoy, Congressman Tonko, Ms. Mahan for being here. Thank you for Albany County. This is a culmination of about 6 or 7 years of research, that I put into this to recognize my grandfather. It all started about 7, 8 years ago, or even longer, when my grandaunt passed away, and we were up at the cemetery, and I saw the gravestone, and it said, you know, John Swedick, private, you know, killed in action 1944, and it had given his you know, 2nd Infantry Division. And I had enough there to start my research, and I wanted to really get involved. Growing up, the one thing I knew was I had a grandfather. He died in World War II, and he died in the Battle of the Bulge, and that's all I knew. So I thought it would be important to find out exactly what happened. And I guess you could say, fortunately, where my grandfather served and where he was killed was a pretty prominent area and with a pretty prominent unit. He served with the 2nd Infantry Division, 23rd Infantry Regiment. He went in October of '44. He went in a kind of a backup role, and then they were fortifying the defenses along the German border with Belgium. It was in October '44, so there were some skirmishes, not any heavy battles whatsoever at that point in time. Then came December of '44. They were initially, the 2nd Infantry Division had gone up to the Rohr Dams to attack the Rohr Dams. His unit was in a reserve position in the Elsenborn Ridge. It's kind of ironic that they were in a reserve, and when the battle broke up, they were the front lines, because they went and they backed up the 99th Infantry Division along the front lines of the Battle of the Bulge. Some, of course, may know in this room what the Battle of the Bulge was. Some may not know to the extent. Battle of the Bulge was Hitler's last grasp at trying to at least win peace in Europe. His goal was to send 300,000 infantry through the middle of Europe to split Northern and Southern Europe, cutting off the supply lines to force a peace between the nations in the West. And of course, he did it in an area where there was little defenses and little ammunition. Some might know in '44, after D-Day, there was an idea that we would win the war by Christmas. So they weren't supplied correctly. They didn't have the right equipment, the right clothing, and as many know, in Belgium in '44 was one of the coldest winters ever. On the morning of the 16th of December, the battle broke out. His unit was ordered to back up the 99th Division. They got there on the 16th. There was some shelling. They dug into the frozen ground overnight, and on December 17th, that's when they went forward. And when they went forward to the front lines, the 99th was running backwards, retreating. The 2nd Infantry Division, not having the correct ammunition, the correct weaponry, were grabbing guns, grabbing ammunition, grabbing stuff, and heading to the front line. What was important in this battle was that the 2nd Infantry Division, most of it, and the 99th, other of the units were up north coming down from the Rohr Dams to back up and to fortify these lines. If the German infantry and the tanks had gotten through, they might have gone to Antwerp and gotten their peace like they wanted. So it was important for the front line guys to hold the line at all costs, so when the rest of the units came down, they could stop them. Now the battle is called the Battle of the Bulge because if you look at a map, it's actually a bulge in the map. My grandfather was on the northern border, and if you see the northern border, it doesn't bulge out. They stopped him there. Others of his squad said, no, we're staying. We're going to back them up. We're going to cover the retreating units. Last seen, my grandfather was exiting a foxhole to do hand-to-hand combat with the German infantry. Again, in my research, with this battle, there are many books. I've read about 6 or 7 books on this specific area, and so I can nail down within a mile of where he was killed and within an hour. Given that, I've learned what lack of ammunition and weaponry they had, so I know when he exited that foxhole, he had nothing left in his M1, and when he came out, it was hand-to-hand combat. Last seen Again, he was leaving the foxhole, and most people know with this history of the battle, it went westward, it went westward, and then finally the units were able to come down, fortify the defenses, and they went back. My understanding is my grandfather laid on the battlefield for a couple weeks before they found him, because that's how long it took to go back through the boundaries. In my research, it was, I could say, enlightening, and I really treasured it. As some people may know, in 1973 there was a fire in St. Louis, I believe St. Louis. A lot of the Army records were destroyed. So it took me about 3 years to convince the government of what my grandfather had earned, and that was a treat. It was fun. If anybody ever has any questions about getting replacement medals or looking to do some history on their family members, give me a call. I can give you a heads up of what I did. But it took me about 3 years. It took me about 4 times on 4 appeals to convince the government of what my grandfather had done. What I had to do is get general orders, find the general orders, mail them to the government and say, see, I told you, this is what he did. So, but I give respect to them because they're not going to hand out medals, willy-nilly. You had to show that you had earned it, and it was my, pleasure in doing that. And again, I thank you. I wanted to recognize my grandfather. Again, he died approximately 71 years ago. He died about 30 years before I was born. But in my research, I've gotten to know him really well, and it's very personal to me. And I wanted to acknowledge he had 2 sons at the time. My grandfather went in late. He was 30. Most guys were young. He had 2 sons at the time. My Uncle Jack is here. He was 5 at the time. And my father, Michael, was 2 at the time when they lost his father. So I'd like to thank all the distinguished guests in Albany County for taking the opportunity to recognize the Albany County citizen who lived in Waterville at the time. Not only his service, but when the call came to sacrifice his life, he ignored the order to retreat and gave his life in battle. So, thank you.
At this time, I'd like to introduce Albany County Executive Daniel P. McCoy, an Iraq combat veteran, and I'm not sure about this number anymore. 25 years, or is it longer now? No, that's about it. No, that's it.
How do you follow that one? You pretty much summed it all up, and but it brings us back to full circle what this whole program's about. It's about honoring people, and especially your grandfather and your father. Who gave up the ultimate sacrifice. Battle of the Bulge was a turning point in the war, pretty much ended it. But we lost over 20,000 soldiers there that day, 20,000. And if you look at World War II as a whole, over 16 million soldiers worldwide lost their lives defending not just this great country, but all countries around the world. It was the turning point of the axis of powers. And your father was part of that. To go in at the age of 30, leaving behind 2 sons and a wife had to be hard on him. And it had to be hard on you, but it just shows the love that you had for your father translated to your son. For him to go and do all this research, to really go into the history and find out, what difference did his grandfather make? And he did make a difference. We sit here today and enjoy the freedoms because of veterans like your father and your grandfather, and many other soldiers that lost their lives around this world. I always get up myself and I think every day, when I go out and I do this job, I look at everybody and I go, you know what? It's great that you have opinion, or we agree to disagree, but we can do that because of veterans. We can live the life we want to live in this country, be whoever we want to be, because veterans laid their lives down on the line, fighting for the freedoms of this great country. And I say the United States is the best country in the world because you can follow whatever religion you want to be, do whatever occupation you want to do, be whatever you want to be in life, and guess what? You can do it here freely with the protections of this great government. To think about your grandfather, to think about your dad. I can't imagine how it was, the questions you had growing up, being 5 and 2. and not really knowing the full impact until later on in life. It had to be something. What's that?
I do.
Oh, did you? It had to be tough. It had to be tough. But it's great to stand there and honor a great man after all these years, 70 years, and to say thank you. Thank you to your family. Thank you to his service to the country. You know, and I'm honored to stand here and say thank you, thank you, thank you.
We thank you.
At this time, I'd like to ask our congressman to come up and say some words, if you would, Mr. Tonko.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
It's an honor to be with so many of our veterans represented through organizations or individually here speaking in tremendous admiration and love for our honoree, who is really a person of greatness. So to John J. Swedick, we say thank you for your contribution to the saga of this wonderful history via its veterans, this nation's veterans, who have continuously penned their love story for a nation that holds great opportunity, and hopefully we respond with great responsibility. To all of my colleagues in elected government, to Dan, who's a pleasure to work with on these events, and Paul is a regular here, so great to be with you, and Reverend Charlene, always adding a wonderful touch with her prayer that she leads for us, and to Joe and his team as a search committee, selection committee. It's good that they do this work so that we can pause in our busy life and recognize individuals who have enabled us to live free. To my predecessor and friend and former colleague in the Assembly, Congressman Mike McNulty, and former exec Mike Hoblock, thank you also for really establishing the pathway that we now continue to plot so that we can pay tribute to these individuals. I see Darius Shanafar in the back of the room too, so thank you for your leadership in Albany, Darius. John J. Swedick as an individual obviously was a brave person. From the contributions made here by his grandson, I'm sorry I didn't catch the name, Matthew? Matthew, thank you. It showed a great connection to your grandfather, who you never met, but obviously, rightfully, you wanted to know all about this tremendous individual. That feeds the heart and soul, I have to believe, knowing that your roots are steeped in this individual who was selfless, undeniably selfless. To the grandchildren who have assembled here, and to John Paul, I heard it said Jack, and Michael, thank you for enduring as young lads. You knew the painful, painful sacrifice. As has been many times said, all gave some gave all. Some gave all. And for those of us who are the products of those veterans of the Second World War, who were fortunate to come back and build a family and build a community, we say thanks. But for those who never had the chance to come back and taste the fruits of their labor, it's painful, decades later. So we never forget. We never forget. We say thank you. His contribution, where obviously the line was drawn, where he wrote the history that this world enjoyed, knowing that it could have been a different outcome, but for the courage and bravery and stamina of folks like John J. Swedick, we're a fortunate people. And then to give so bravely in those last days, and to be willing to again dig deep and provide from that character that he vesseled. What a powerful statement. So, not surprisingly, a Purple Heart shared with him a Bronze Star, a Silver Star, because of that courageous individual. So know that you're part of a great tree that's rooted in greatness to this nation. And we're a freer people. We have the opportunities and the joys and the freedoms because of people like him. In his honor, in his memory, We've asked that a flag be flown over the nation's capital. This flag is presented with great thanks and great humility, a humble quality that this nation holds in its heart for an individual like John J. Swedick. So it's my honor to have been asked to have the flag flown and to present it here this morning. And again, we thank you. The community thanks you for John J. Swedick.
We thank you.
Thank you, Congressman, very much. At this time, I'd like to ask Supervisor Hand to come up and say some words, please.
Good morning, and thank you very much. I'm very honored to be here on behalf of the town of Colony. I didn't know when I got here, but one of our staff, Debbie, is part of the family. So it's great to see you, Debbie, and glad I could be here for this ceremony. I think there are just so many important things that were said this morning, and kind of puts lots of good things in perspective. And Matthew, I think as a grandson, I'm sure your grandfather is very proud of you, and as well as your dad and your uncle and your family. The research that you did is something that you'll carry with you forever. It was something that you had to work hard for, were persistent, but you knew why you were doing it and why it was so important. And so that's something that you should be very proud of. And the history behind your grandfather's time in service, and as he gave up his life, paid the ultimate sacrifice for his country and the freedoms, as Dan talked about. You know, these are things that we can't forget, we should never forget, and throughout our busy lives, it's ceremonies like this and grandsons like you and family members that, again, put everything in perspective, and the reason why we're here and honored to be here with you. So on behalf of the town of Colony, we have a proclamation for you, and it describes the life of your grandfather, but his courage, his bravery, and of course, it's clear to see that he brought about a wonderful family, and so thank you all for being here as well.
And finally, if you would, Darius, please join us. We have the Albany City Treasurer here to present a proclamation on behalf of the City of Albany. Thank you. I said, I'm sorry, Mr. Treasurer.
Thank you so much. I find frequently when I follow such wonderful partners in government as the Congressman, the County Executive, and our neighboring supervisor in Colony, there are really few words left to say. Freedom isn't free, and if you love your freedom, think of better. And nowhere was that more true than in World War II, and for our veterans of World War II. The Battle of Bulge was certainly a place where, had we not won, it could have prolonged the war, and it could have perhaps turned the tide of war for Germany. And there were so many people who lost their lives, so many Americans who lost their lives in the Ardennes forest. And we're very grateful to your grandfather, Matt, who was a classmate of mine in law school. I see those research skills did well from Albany Law School. But thank you, and thank you for allowing us to honor your grandfather and your father. It is perhaps more important for us, even than for you, to honor his memory and to honor the memories of all those who served. On behalf of the Mayor of Albany, Kathy Sheehan, also Albany Law graduate, I have a few words left to say, but what I can do on behalf of the mayor who was able to be here today is to proclaim today John J. Swedick Day in the city of Albany. So thank you.
Thank you. I have the proclamations also for you, and I held on to them because a certain person said that I had to make an announcement and I would forget that announcement. No, I didn't. That's why I held on to these things so I could make the announcement.
You might want to take notes.
Joe would like me to take notes. But today, there's a very important news conference also at noon, and I thought it was fitting as the ceremony comes to an end. Senator Gillibrand, along with Congressman Tonko, will be here today to really try to extend benefits for Vietnam veterans, and it's called the Blue Water Navy Vietnam Veterans Act, which would ensure that these Blue Water Navy veterans would receive disability and health care benefits for diseases linked to Agent Orange. So it's very vital, and I want to thank Congressman Tonko and Senator Gillibrand for making sure that we continue to protect veterans around the world, but especially our own that are back home. Oh, I'm sorry, and Congressman Gibson also. So if you can be back here at noon, that would be great to everybody, but I did want to say thank you. And also, thanks, Jim, before I forget. Senator Neil Breslin has a proclamation for your dad and for your grandfather, and Assembly Member Pat Fahey and John McDonald that are usually always here, same thing, similar regards, and they both have proclamations here for your father and your grandfather.
Yeah, you're only right. Is that good enough?
Yes, there's a love note for you here. And this is first. Thank you.
Jeez.
You must have put one right.
No, I didn't take a picture.
Mr. Martell, is one of the Rosenzweigs prepped out there to play taps for us? Are they standing by? Okay. Now, if you would, we'd like to honor the memory of your grandfather and your dad by hearing taps. Joe, didn't I have an announcement to make too? You wanted me to say something? Blanchard Post next month, August 3rd, Petty Officer 2nd Class. That's the next honor event will be in Delmar, New York. And we'd like to end our program now by taking some pictures with the family. And again, thank you all very much for coming. We'll do the pictures and then we go outside. All right, Joe wants me to make sure that I tell everyone. We're going to take the pictures, then we're sorry I screwed this up too. Additional instructions, Matthews,